We're talking about cops, and I'd like to ask you about the participation of police departments. How do you get the participation?
How do we get participation from police departments? Very good question. Initially, it was extremely difficult because the press and police had an adversarial relationship. Generally speaking, if the press was interested in the police, it was because of some wrongdoing or corruption or unjustified shooting or whatever, and it pretty much still is. The press is not examining the police department to report on good things. They're generally speaking looking for newsworthy items. So that tradition was extremely strong back when I started Cops, and I had a hell of a time convincing anyone to let us film with them. Now, what broke the ice for me was that I had already filmed in Broward County, Florida, during my Geraldo days when I was doing the 2-hour event specials and all that sort of thing. So guys like, excuse me, guys like Sheriff Navarro were already familiar with the production company and with the way we conducted business. So he was very amenable to giving us a shot on Cops. He said, in effect, sure, come on down, let the chips fall where they may.
And then how were you able to get others on board later?
Well, once Cops appeared on the air, it was all Broward County, Florida initially, and then we could take those episodes, show them to other departments and say, look, here's what we do. We are not the news. We are not here to expose your department or to look for dirt or to try to make you look bad. We just want to show what a difficult job a police officer has on a daily basis. That's all. That's our agenda. That's our mandate. That's why we're here. So once we showed episodes, police officers got it very quickly. They went, oh, I see what you're doing. I get it. You know, and then they started the doors started opening all over the country. We went to Florida and we went to Las Vegas and we went all over the country. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Miami, you name it. Excuse me.
Now, did anyone ever turn you down?
Yes, we have to this day not filmed in Chicago, and we have not filmed in Honolulu, both of which locations I'd like to film. Chicago, I think, has a strong tradition of the mayor dictates all, so you're never going to get in the Chicago department unless the mayor okays it. And I think, frankly, there's a certain lingering paranoia in Chicago about corruption and the fear of exposure of corruption, because it hasn't had a great history as a PD. So it may be that there's too many fears about there's more to lose than gain. Now, most departments we film with have discovered that their recruitment goes up, that more people apply to be a police officer in their department, and most departments have discovered that it's a positive thing for them to have been on Cops, that people are aware of the job that they've done, and they can appreciate it more. Because again, you generally don't hear anything about a police department unless it's negative. Well, we show what they do, and they encounter a lot of negative things, and a lot of negative things happen on Cops, but the police officers themselves aren't the perpetrators of the negative things. They're the, more often than not, the solution to the negativity. So it's a whole different mindset, a different viewpoint, a different perspective. And again, as a ride-along show, we're offering a perspective, a point of view. If we rode along with well, truck drivers, they would be the heroes. We ride with cops, so they're the heroes. If we went with fishermen, they'd be the heroes. And many shows since Cops have done exactly that, and you tend to identify with your subject. So I think it's been a positive experience for police departments. I think it's put a face to a uniform, and in that sense, I think it's a net gain for any department.
Now, do you have any? Do the departments have any control over what is shown, or?
They have negative, they can refuse to approve a segment. I show segments. Here's how it works. I'm a guest, basically. In any department that I film in, I'm a guest. I'm not the news, so I don't mind showing them what I do. I show them segments and say, this is what we're going to put on the air. If they object, and they said that we can't show that, and that has happened, and it's usually for legal reasons or for exposure reasons, for lawsuit reasons. And I can give you 1,000 examples of that. If there's a high-speed chase and somebody is killed in that chase, there's automatically going to be a lawsuit. So they don't want to put that on the air because that's going to result in inflaming the lawsuit and the legal environment. In the case of undercover cops, they don't want undercover cops exposed on the air because that endangers a police officer's life. Those are the things that are generally of concern to departments. Other things like whether or not a guy's wearing a hat when that's the procedure, it's not a big deal, you know. We say, come on. You know, we talk them out of that kind of stuff. But we've shown everything from police-involved officer shootings. I mean, we've had a lot on cops over the years. We've had high-speed chases in which, you know, cop cars have crashed. We've had high-speed chases in which suspects have crashed into people. And you know, all these policies differ from state to state and department to department. So we've shown extraordinary things on cops that I never thought I'd see on television, and to this day continue to see extraordinary things. And I think, again, that's part of the allure, the appeal, the fascination, and the draw of Cops, the television show.
Where's the line drawn as to what you can show and what you can't?
Well, we have standards and practices. I mean, obviously, I can't show blood and guts and gore. America's a funny place, you know. You cannot say Jesus Christ on network television in vain, but you can show blood all over a floor. It's a bizarre dichotomy in our society. So I try. I mean, look, I self-censor in the sense that I know what's going to fly and what seems to be appropriate to the story. It's inappropriate to show too much, and it's also inappropriate to show too little, because I've always tried to push the limits a little bit so that I'm really showing you this is real. This is not reenacted. This is not fictional. This is not fake. This is the real deal. This is a truth you are witnessing. And I say a truth because it's not capital the truth as an absolute truth, because all truth in terms of documentary filmmaking depends on where you're standing. It's a truth, not the truth. And I want to, you know, it's a version of reality. It's not the reality. So when I show police officers going out on cops, that's a version of the truth. But it is the truth. What you are seeing is true. It happened. It wasn't fake. It wasn't staged. It wasn't scripted. It's real. It's as genuine and true as you can get. But it's only a truth, because you don't see what happens behind the cameraman. You don't see what happens out of frame. And again, that's why it's a version of reality.
What about the time span? I mean, this is something that's been going on for over 20 years. Has what you've shown changed?
You know, I think police procedures have changed over the years because of the Rodney King event and things like that. There's less likelihood to have rogue cops or brutal cops or police officers who are out of control. I mean, look, training has improved over the years. I mean, departments are more and more professional. They weed out the bad apples if they get them. And you know, they try to weed them out. It's not like they want to have bad cops. You know, no police department wants to have a rotten apple in the barrel. I think that the degrees of professionalism have increased greatly over the years, and the enlightenment of procedures have increased greatly over my era. I came out of the 60s, and it's a wonder I didn't do a show called Pigs. And I'm not joking, because that was my mindset and where I came from. I'm a kid of the 60s. I'm sort of anti-authoritarian by nature. So I was never, if you told me I was going to do a show about cops, I would have said, what am I going to call it, Pigs? It just wasn't in my realm of reality. So what has happened to me personally over the years is I've developed a great deal of respect for all people in public service. That not just police officers, but paramedics, firemen, you know, nurses, anybody that's serving the public. I have a great deal of admiration for, because it's not an easy job. If you're a police officer, you're not paid the most money that you could conceivably make. You're risking life and limb on behalf of others, and that's just a fact. You know, you can be as critical as you want of any police officer in the world, but he is literally willing, or she is willing to put down their life to protect their society. Now, to me, that's admirable. It really is. And the same holds true for firemen, the same holds true for paramedics, and all these people that risk life and limb on behalf of society. So I've modified my thinking over the years for good reason, for experiential reasons. I forgot what the rest of the question was. Off and running badly.
Now, the police themselves, for the most part, do they want to appear on camera?
I think most departments are very happy to have us in to film with them because it's the ultimate form of transparency. I mean, this country does not have a secret police, and I am thrilled with that fact. Countries that do have secret police or police that are not transparent, departments that are not transparent, generally speaking, have problems, and they have an adversarial relationship with their own populace. I'm happy that we can go film with departments across the country because it shows something very good and very transparent about our society. I think it's a good, healthy thing to do.
What about the individual officers themselves? For the most part, are they?
You know, I would say that it's been my experience that 9 out of 10 police officers are happy for us to film with them. If nothing else, it takes away the drudgery parts of their jobs because we show the most active things that happen on a policeman's watch. Trust me, there's hours of boredom with paperwork and driving around, not aimlessly, but driving around in circles in your quadrant or your section or your division, looking to prevent crime or looking to apprehend criminals if crimes are perpetrated. So it's we don't show all of that stuff. We only show the juicy stuff. We show because we couldn't sustain a television show by showing driving around for a half hour and nothing happening. And that certainly does take place on a daily basis across America in any police division you can think of. By the same token, many police officers are answering 15, 20 calls a night and just going from one dangerous situation to another, in which they could lose their lives. I mean, we have had a dozen officers that have been killed in the line of duty that we have filmed with. We didn't film them being killed in the line of duty, thank God, but there have been a dozen at least officers who have been killed in the line of duty, people with whom we've already filmed. So that tells you something.
Let's talk about the people that you're filming, the criminals and
Suspects.
Suspects, yes.
Everybody's a suspect. Nobody's a criminal
Yes,
until they're proven to be a criminal in a court of law. I mean, that's the politically correct way to say it. But I mean, it is true. The presumption of innocence is a fundamental hallmark of our society, and I'm a firm believer in it. By the same token, if somebody's arrested, they're presuming they're guilty. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy in our system, our justice system. The district attorney is presuming guilt, and the police officer who arrests somebody is presuming that they're guilty of that crime, or they wouldn't have arrested them. So, but the suspects on our show, some are blatantly guilty because you've just seen them perpetrate the very thing for which they're being charged. Many are obviously guilty of whatever they're charged with because their behavior tells you so, and you watch them and you learn as you watch them as they reveal that they are guilty and then eventually confess. And the rest may be totally innocent and just in a bad place at a bad time. And the whole issue of guilt and innocence and crime and punishment is an interesting subject. Because it depends on your viewpoint, and it depends on which laws are being enforced, and it depends on whether or not you agree with those laws to begin with. So, I mean, we all kind of agree that murder is a bad thing and that that's a crime and you should be arrested for it. And the same with theft, and the same with assaults, and the same with rape and mayhem and robbery and all these different subjects. When it comes to the drug arena, it's a little bit different because a lot of people don't believe that marijuana should be illegal, for example. And yet, thousands of people are arrested every year for it. We have over 2 million people in our prisons in this country. Over 2 million. That's more than China and more than Russia and more than any other country. We arrest something like, I think the figure is 14 million people a year are arrested in America 14 million people a year. Now, that doesn't mean they're all convicted. It doesn't mean they all end up in jail or prison, but they have been arrested for one offense or another, misdemeanors, felonies, whatever the case may be. That's a lot of people being processed through the system. And it also says something about our society. Excuse me, do we have that many criminals, or do we maybe have too many laws that are wasting a lot of time?
Now, the suspects themselves, how do you get them to sign off to appear on the show?
You know, the whole issue of release is an interesting one, because initially it was difficult to get people, talk them into being on television. But once Cops established itself, we're sort of become a pop cultural phenomenon, because people will say, get the camera away from me, if they think you're the news. But when they hear that we're the Cops crew, they readily accede to signing a release and being on the show. And they say things like, oh, Cops, that's cool. They've seen the show, they know the show, and they're perfectly happy to sign a release. Now, I think one of the things that have happened, 30 years ago, it was a big deal to be on television. It's now commonplace for the common man or woman to be on television. Look at the plethora of game-based reality shows now. Everybody wants to be on television. It's become the portal to fame and fortune. It's not unusual to be on television. And it's not unusual to see cameras anymore. When I was growing up as a kid, you saw a camera, you thought they were making a movie. It was a big deal. It is not a big deal now.
Do you think that some of them play for the cameras?
I think, sure. There's always a tendency for people, if they're aware of cameras, to play for the cameras, and they certainly do on all of the reality-based game shows. That's part of the expectation. With Cops, I think much less so, because nobody's going to get a prize for being arrested on Cops. They're not going to get a reward. Au contraire, they're probably going to go to jail if they're being arrested on Cops. And they're usually too wrapped up in what's going on at that moment to worry too much about the cameras, because if they've just robbed something or shot somebody or been involved in a heavy-duty domestic abuse case or in an assault or whatever the case may be, they're generally speaking caught up in that moment and not with the implications of their, fame and their fortune, or their portal to fame and fortune, as if it were a game-based reality show. So it's a different reality. It's a docuseries. Look, Cops is an existential variety show with a criminal accent with real decor. That's what it is. It's not about games. It's not about, it's about existence, and it's about the variety of people that can be involved in the criminal arena for one reason or another, either as victims or perpetrators. So it's a completely different issue. It's an existential variety show with an accent on the criminal justice system.
Wow. So at what point do you get them to sign the release?
We sign on the spot. Wherever we are, whenever we finish filming, we approach the people and ask them for a release.
What do you do if they're, in the back of the squad car handcuffed? How do you do it?
We'll get them the cuffs taken off to sign release. Come on. Mm-hmm. Or get them when they're in jail and they take them off anyway to put them in a cell. Or before they're even arrested. It depends. You got to wait for your moment, to obtain a release. But we're very good at it. Our crews have been doing this. Many of my crew have been out there for the whole duration of Cops, a couple of them. And most of them are 10-year veterans, 15-year veterans, and they're good psychologists. They learn when you go for the release and when you don't. You don't walk up to a guy that's screaming and fighting with the cops and say, hey, by the way, would you sign this release for me? That's kind of an inappropriate moment. You got to wait for a better opportunity. So you let things cool down, and then you approach them and ask for the release. But we get probably 95% of the people that appear on Cops have, we get 100% of the people that appear on Cops are released. We get 95% of the people we film to sign releases. It's pretty good average.
Well, talk about the crews and how they go about what they do.
Well, I've had crews that have been with me, as I say, for nearly the 22 seasons we've been filming. I've had a couple that have been with us from the very beginning. They've become associate producers on the show, as well as cameramen and/or soundmen. These guys have become thoroughly grounded in the law and order arena. They know, they're very street smart now. They've been out on these shows. I had guys that came on the show that went chasing after a suspect, and the first thing they did is when it was over, is put their camera down and throw up because of the excitement and the adrenaline and the danger. This has happened on high-speed chases. I mean, and it's such a jaded group that the soundman will laugh at the cameraman that does this. If he loses his lunch over a high-speed chase, because it's part of the environment. You have to toughen yourself up a little. You witness things that are sometimes horrific, and I mean, from murders to accidents to shootings. There's just a lot of stuff. I mean, child abuse, things you don't want to see. You just don't want to see these things, but you're going to see them if you're a cameraman on cops or a soundman on cops. So they get very street smart, too, about what to watch out for and when to be wary of different situations. We've had a few injuries on the show, not a lot. Mostly it's our cameraman chasing after a police officer who's chasing after a suspect, and the cameraman would be looking through a lens and run into a clothesline, that kind of thing. Or they learn to lower their cameras and run while holding them steady, and then they'll step in a pothole. Or there's so many things that can go wrong. Or in the case of one new cameraman we had, he was with a veteran soundman, but he got separated from the soundman in a raucous party, and he got whacked on the head with a 2x4, which fortunately hit the camera first, destroyed the camera, but it insulated his head from the 2x4, so that was his first night on the job. I mean, you've got to be savvy. You've got to be aware of what's going on around you. But our motto is you don't ever interfere with anything unless a police officer's life is in danger. And that has happened. We've had 2 instances where a police officer was becoming overpowered by a suspect, and the soundman put down his gear and helped the police officer because it was a dangerous situation. He was going for his gun. Other than that, our job is to stay out of whatever's happening. The officer is doing his thing, we're recording it, but not to the point where you let somebody get injured. And the other example is a lady needed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and we had one of our soundmen was a paramedic, so he stepped in on behalf of the police officer and administered mouth-to-mouth resuscitation because he knew, life-saving procedures. But other than that, they don't get involved in what's going on, and they're strictly ordered not to get involved. And that includes if, a cop's chasing somebody, you don't chase the guy and tackle him. That's not, and that has happened. We had one guy went chasing after the suspect and tackled him for the police officer. I said, "What are you doing? Don't you dare do that. That's not your job. You're not supposed to be doing that." Among other things, he screwed up the segment. Never aired because, it's not cops then. It should be, soundman.
What about protective gear? Do they have to wear anything special?
Just for liability purposes, I have them all wear bulletproof vests now because it makes them happier. In my day, we didn't wear them, but that was then and this is now, so it's okay, I guess.
Have you seen more violence over the years in terms of
No,
the
I think
guns?
there's less violence. I really do. I mean, it's harder to shoot cops. That's the good news for America. The bad news for me. It takes more crews out there for longer periods of time to get the same kinds of material we used to get. And that's because Florida, for example, at one time was like the Wild West with the cocaine explosion and all the crimes related to that. And that not just Florida, Los Angeles, New York, any metropolitan area had big-time drug problems and a lot of shootings and drug deals and all that kind of thing. But a lot of that has it's subsided. Now, with bad economic times, crime tends to rise, for obvious reasons. But the nature of the crimes might change too. Look, if we had no ghettos, we'd have probably 80% less crime. It's a societal issue. The solutions to all the crime are societal. And many of the causes are societal, not individual. And some of them may be the system, with laws that are maybe inapplicable in the 21st century or not reasonable in the 21st century, however you wish to characterize it.
Who would you say the main viewers of cops are?
Well, I'm sure it's males 18 to 49, but we have a very strong female viewership too, which might surprise people. Steven Spielberg, for example's favorite shows are Seinfeld and Cops. We have fans across the board. I mean, writers, politicians. Marley Maitland, for example, is a huge Cops fan. In fact, I did a 20th anniversary DVD and put her in it because she's an enormous Cops fan. Cher, I mean, all kinds of people like Cops. It's interesting because it's at the end of the day, it's a documentary. It's a documentary that happens to be in 3 segments and be on network television and then in syndication and on cable afterward. But that's what it is. The roots and the heart of Cops is documentary filmmaking. And I've never pretended it's anything but, and I'm proud of the fact that it is. And I want it to be. You know, again, it's an existential variety show with authentic decor. It's about real people, real events, real life, you know, and it is a version of that truth. You know, it is a truth. It is a reality.
What have been the biggest criticisms you've received about the show?
Well, exploitation is always a criticism you're going to get with any reality show. Are they being exploitive? Are they, you know, and I would ask, who are we exploiting? I don't think we exploit people. I don't think we linger on misery for misery's sake or prurience for prurience sake or any of that. I think when you have a show about crime, it's not for everybody's taste. For obvious reasons. A lot of people don't want to witness the seamier side of life. They don't want to see what goes on in their backyards or their back alleys after midnight. They don't want to see suffering and crime and criminals and crimes being perpetrated. It's just not pleasant in that sense, right? It's not dinner time chit-chat. But it happens, and it's real, and it's genuine, and I think it can be very informative, and it's certainly true. So to not, or to ignore it is to sort of ignore reality, or at least a segment or a piece of reality. And I've always been of the mind that you should see what's going on in your own society. So I look at it differently. I don't see it as exploitive in any way, shape, or form. I see it as informative at best, and maybe over the top at worst. You know, maybe I show too much sometimes, but I try not to. I just try to push the edge to show enough reality so that the viewer experiences it, witnesses it, and hopefully understands it a little better.
Are there issues regarding racial profiling, anything like that?
Well, racial profiling, yeah, that's an interesting subject. Here's the reality of crime. In the street crime, approximately 60% to 70% is perpetrated or by people of color, right? Maybe 30% or 35% of the suspects are white people. In prisons, the percentages are pretty much the same. 35% maybe of the people in prison are white, and the rest are people of color, meaning black, Hispanic, whatever. Now, on Cops, we reverse that. We show 60 to 70% white suspects and 30 to 35%, or maybe as high occasionally as 40, of people of color. Now, why do I do that? Because I don't want to contribute to negative stereotyping. Everybody knows that crime takes place in ghettos. We all know that, or should know that, the majority of street crime. All of the white criminals are at Enron and places like that. And that's just because they're not disenfranchised and they do different kinds of crimes. Doesn't mean there are any fewer criminals. I mean, I think there's so many criminals on Wall Street that you could take half of them and throw them in jail and you'd be right in 90% of your arrests. I mean, perpetrating all kinds of frauds on the American people and with their scams and double juke and jive them schemes. But my point is, I reversed the issue for Cops because I never wanted to be accused of stereotyping or any nonsense like that, even though the facts are the facts. And if I were being accurate, I would show exactly the percentages of what happens with street crime. I don't do it because, number one, I want to reflect my audience more, and the audience is more white than black or Hispanic. So, I try to reflect the demos of the audience, not the demos of the crime. And that takes the onus off of negative stereotyping, too. In terms of, what was the second part of your question? Or did I answer?
You did. You actually answered the whole, answered the whole
Oh,
question.
I thought there was a second part. It's the academic impulse, right? Part one and part two.
It was really about the profiling. So.
Profiling, yeah. Second part of your question was profiling. A lot of police officers do, in fact, profile. But as James Elroy once told me, we had a discussion about this, and he said, what people must understand is a lot of so-called profiling is experiential. And by that, he said, I mean this. If you have Irish bombers that are bombing America for the IRA as terrorists, isn't it reasonable to stop blue-eyed Irish-looking people that are coming through security points? Is that profiling? Or is that experience and expectation given the MO of the perpetrator? So this is where issues get confused sometimes. I completely agree that you should not stop a black guy because he's black and he's driving down the street. It's absurd to stop. However, if you see a guy driving down the street with a busted window and or 4 kids who are just barely looking over the steering wheel in a car with a busted window, maybe they stole the car, just maybe. Now, is that profiling or experience? Now, what happens with cops, I think, is they sometimes lean too far over with their experience and assume that everybody, who's a kid, who's a Hispanic is going to be a gang member. And that's just not the case, as we know. But again, there's this confusion between what's profiling and what's experience. And it's a gray area and it's a controversial area. And it's the same kind of controversy of when do you have hot pursuits and not, because it cuts both ways. I can tell you a very quick story about a hot pursuit. I did a show called Anatomy of Crime, and we examined that very issue, and it comes up all the time. Cop is chasing after some guys in a car on a hot pursuit because they'd done something. They called him off the hot pursuit, said, no, drop off, it's too dangerous. The guys get away. As it turns out, they had a girl in the trunk whom they raped and murdered after they had been chased and and they had to cut them loose. To this day, that cop is haunted because he said, I could have prevented that. I could have prevented that. Now, by the same token, there have been hot pursuits chasing after a suspect and crashed into innocent bystanders who happened to pull through lights and people were killed. So where do you draw the line? When is it valid to pursue and when is it not valid to pursue? And these are things that cops wrestle with and police departments wrestle with all the time.
Going back to Cops itself, the show, what happens to all the footage that
all the footage we don't use?
Mm-hmm.
I dump it because you can't, originally I was trying to keep all of the footage and I had these grandiose notions of having this vast reservoir of cop footage and multitudinous crimes and variations on crimes and all the different cities we shot. And then technology kept changing so that all the three-quarter stuff I had is worthless. Then all the beta stuff is worthless. It goes on and on. So I ultimately decided the most practical thing to do, if it ain't in the show, it's got to go. And that's what we now do. If it doesn't go in the show, I just dump it, degauss it, recycle it, or throw it away.
Has any of the footage been used as evidence in trials?
Yes. Occasionally we get subpoenaed because the footage cuts both ways. We've had defense subpoena footage, to prove that their client was unjustly accused, and they see on the footage he was clearly guilty. So it doesn't help the cause, and they wish they hadn't done it, right? So we get relatively few subpoenas on footage. I mean, it's surprising because as I say, it cuts both ways. It cuts for the prosecution or it cuts for the defense. So they got to be pretty sure about what's going on before they subpoena it.
One of the cultural impacts of the show is the theme song. Can you talk about how that came into play?
Yes, the theme song. One of the things I wanted to do from the get-go was have a reggae theme song. Why? Because it seemed different at the time. Nobody had done it, and I wanted to do, I wanted to be the first kid on the block to do a show with a reggae theme. So when we were in Florida shooting the pilot, I sent everybody out to find any reggae band they could find, any reggae record they could find, and bring it back to me, and I'd listen to all these things. So they brought back tons of these things, and we had, Rasta men coming and going all day long, delivering their home CDs and all that kind of thing, or tapes in those days. So I listened to all this stuff, and I came across this group called Inner Circle, and I heard Bad Boys. I said, that's it. That's the song. I mean, it was too good. I mean, Bad Boys, what you gonna do, what you gonna do when they come for you, et cetera, et cetera. It was just too perfect. So I said, that's the song, and I made a deal with them. And we bought the rights to the song, and then they were breaking up at the time as a band, and subsequently, like 2 or 3 years later, they won Best Grammy for a reggae album entitled Bad Boys, which featured that song.
Talk about some of the parodies. I mean, there's been so many parodies of Cops.
Well, I look upon parodies, they can either honor you or dish you, They're either a tribute or a blasphemy. Things like Reno 911 I enjoy a lot. I think it's a fun, clever show with a bunch of talented people. I like all those guys. We've had lunch. They appear in the 20th anniversary DVD because they're fun. And they said, hey, we'll come and help you with that. So I like that show, obviously. Some of the other shows I'm not as crazy about. They dilute you. But tributes and appearing in movies and on television, I love it. I mean, we've been in everything from Something About Mary to Spielberg's futuristic film. What was that? God, I can't think of the name of it. Control or something like that. No.
Minority Report?
Minority Report, yeah. We've been in films from Something About Mary to Minority Report to what's this, Rachel Getting Married? All kinds of films. I think the line there was, hey, didn't I see you on Cops? It's just all over the map because it's become part of pop culture. And in that sense, it's gratifying, it's fun, it's entertaining. I have people send me stuff all the time about, did you see this? And it'll be a Saturday Night Live skit about cops, or it'll be, there was a kid who did a whole thing called Troops, which was a takeoff on Star Wars and cops. It was great. I put that in the DVD as well, just because it was a 20th anniversary DVD, and that seemed appropriate to put in it. So, and we had a lot of parodies and tributes and that kind of thing. It's fun.
Why do you think it has caught on in the pop culture? What do you think the?
I don't have all the answers. What do I know? I don't know. I think, look, I have my theories about why Cops has endured. I think to this day, it's immediate, it keeps you in the moment, it's unpredictable, you don't know what's going to happen. It's a subjective universe that's easy to identify with because of the process of the way it's shot. It's the only show I know of on television that has no music within the show itself, no narrator, no host, no reenactments, no script. Show me any other show like that. There aren't a lot of them, if there are. It's not managed reality. It's caught. It's a documentary series. There have been other shows like the Osbournes or whatever, but they're manipulated or managed shows, or the Hills managed shows. They're like a version of reality. They're not even a version of the truth. They're just a managed reality show. So it's a whole different genre. I think it's the only docuseries on network TV, isn't it, to this day? I don't know. I think for all those reasons. It keeps you in the moment. It's unpredictable. You have to go along literally for a ride. You see a world you're not likely to see. And even though I think I've seen it all on Cops, I'm still surprised because bizarre things sometimes happen. Strange and weird things sometimes happen.
Like what?
Oh, I was watching the footage, and I'll give you a classic example. I'm watching routinely, segments and trying to pick shows, and suddenly this cop car pulls up, and a woman takes off and smashes into it, a rather obese lady, and the cop jumps out of the car and he runs around to open her door. She jumps out with a butcher knife that's about a 10-inch butcher knife, and she's going to stab him. And he tackles her or the other cop tackles her, and she falls on the knife, which embeds in her body. It was just bizarre, and it happened so quickly, and that's the kind of surprise and bizarre thing that can happen on cops. I mean, who would expect that? You know, it looked like a routine call. It's because there's always the potential for something extraordinary that will happen, or strange, or bizarre, or unheard of, or just something you're not going to experience watching scripted television, so, or even managed reality, game-based reality shows. You just don't get that, you know, because again, it's true, it's real, it's a truth, it's a reality, but it really did happen. Everything that you see on Cops is real. It's genuine. And I don't think there's any substitute, ultimately, for knowing that something is real when it happens.
How has Fox treated you over the years?
Fox and I have a perfect kind of relationship. We don't talk to each other. I mean, and I don't mean that negatively. I do my thing and they leave me alone, and I'm happy, and I hope they're happy. And obviously they're happy because they keep reordering the show. I mean, I'm a low maintenance guy. I just do the show. I'm happy doing the show. I still love doing Cops and will until it stops, because it still interests me, and I'm ADD, you know, so I'm happy to do it. And, you know, my son's in the business now, so he'll do it if I, you know, croak one day or retire or whatever. So, but I'll do it as long as there's an appetite for it on the public's part.
Is there an international appeal to it?
Yes. There's nowhere in the world I can go that I haven't seen Cops on the air, even to this day. It's all over the map. Sometimes pirated, but but it's out there.
What about your core team? Who would you consider the core team on the show?
Doug Waterman is an anchor and a rock at Langley Productions. He's been with me for 20-odd years. He's the supervising producer. He's an extraordinary guy. He's does more on the show than anybody. I have nothing but kudos and laudatory things to say about Doug. He started as an editor way back when, and then he was promoted all the way up to supervising producer, and he's like, you know, part of the soul of Cops. I mean, he keeps it all together and manages all of our editors, and he and I sit down once a week and pick shows. You know, I pick the show, but he presents it and argues his case, and I make the final decisions. And then I would say, in all honesty, my son has gotten very involved in it. He started as a PA a few years ago, and now he's worked his way up, and we do other television series.
Is that Morgan?
Yeah, it's Morgan Langley. We do Jail together, and Street Patrol, and Cops, and a couple other series we have coming up. So he's very involved. Karen Horry has been with me forever. She handles all that, you know, legal junk. Who else? And I've got editors that have been with me for years and years. One of them's about 70, I think. What's Chuck? Chuck's been with me forever. We just won the ACE Awards for editing, or he won it, whatever. So, I mean, yeah, I've got a lot of people that have been on the show for years and years.
One person we didn't talk about was Malcolm Barber, who you started
Malcolm,
with.
my ex-partner, the CAD. Well, he retired, 15 years ago. So he hasn't been around much. And he wasn't around much in the beginning, to be honest with you. Malcolm and I were business partners for, I don't know, from 80, let's see, I'm trying to think of the dates, God. 82 maybe till 92, somewhere around there. And then he retired in I guess he retired in 93 or 94. So, you know, he went off doing his thing. And
What do you think he brought to the party in those early years when you were starting out?
Malcolm brought dealing with business issues. He did a lot of that stuff. You know, that's why we hooked up. Originally, I was going to be the creative guy, and he's going to be the business guy. And I'd shared all credits because, yeah, I figure your partners are partners. But he was a skeptic about Cops. He didn't think it would ever work. He thought it was a lousy idea. So I laughed at him and says, from a lousy idea, you're suddenly claiming, you know, because we'd do interviews and stuff, and he'd be pontificating, and I'd say, look who's good, look who likes the show now. But he was a very amusing, entertaining guy in his day.
Do you think the show Cops will continue along for?
I don't know. At this stage of the game, I hope it goes 25 years because I would like to. Now I'm into setting longevity records. I think that'd be fun. And look, as long as the show appeals to people, and it still does, it wins its time slot on Saturday nights more often than not. And that's after 22 seasons. So I'll go with what happens. I mean, I hope it breaks records. I'm still competitive enough that I want to break some records, and I think we've broken a few already, but I want to break some more. We've done about 800 episodes, and 800 episodes of network TV ain't so bad, right?
And you have other projects going on. You mentioned Jail.
We have Jail, which is an interesting series, and that's sort of what happens after Cops. You go to jail. So you pick them up in jail. And it's pretty much the same style. It's that Langley video verite kind of thing, 3 acts, It's an interesting series because jail is much different from police officers out on the streets, chasing down suspects. It's a different reality, a different environment.
Who are you following? Are you following the?
We follow the guards, basically. The correction officers. We follow correction officers as they process people in, and then, of course, the subjects are the people coming and going. And again, there are 14 million people arrested every year, so you get all types, literally. They're not everybody that goes to jail is not a criminal. This is one fundamental issue people have to understand. Because you've gone to jail doesn't mean you're a criminal. It means you made a mistake, or you might have made a mistake. Maybe you didn't do anything and you were just wrong place, wrong time. Who knows? But you get housewives, you get principals, you get school teachers, you get firemen, you get you name it. Anybody you can think of has been to jail. So jail is interesting in that regard because not only the prostitutes and the murderers and all that kind of stuff, but you see a wide variety of other people who are caught in extremis, which is sort of the dramatic kernel of what makes jail work. It's what makes cops work. It's extreme situations, dramatic situations.
Another show is Street Patrol.
Street Patrol is sort of it's my one imitation of myself. It's Cops Light, that's what I call it. It's very much like Cops, cinema verite, video verite approach. The difference is that we offer more information at the end of each segment about what happened to that suspect or what the law is that put that person in jail, or it's more of a follow-up approach to because people used to always ask me, well, what happens when? What happens afterwards? So that's what it is.
Have you ever done anything with the original Cops about what happens afterwards to some of these people?
If it ain't broken, don't fix it. I decided that it worked, and I know that there's always an appetite to want to know more. We all have it. I have it. Everybody has it. But by the same token, I try to capture as purely as possible what did happen, so that at least you know that, and you know it in a way you know nothing else. Because you've seen it. You've seen it unfold in front of you, and it's pretty much real time. It's what's going on. There's no messing around with it. There's no editorializing. It's, you can figure it out for yourself, and I think there's a great appeal to that on the part of an audience. They get to sit and they go, well, that isn't quite like anything else. I know that really happened there. And it can be very dramatic, If I were doing accountants, it would be a bore because, the only interesting thing that happens in accounting is if they catch, Ken Lay's accountant or something, the Enron accountant that cooked the books. But that's not that dramatic. But when a cop is chasing after somebody and he catches them, that's dramatic. Or when he's in a fight with the suspect that's trying to jerk his gun out and shoot him, that's dramatic. Or when, they arrest anybody, it's just a different reality. It's more real in some ways. It's more, because it's rare. You don't see that. You get clips in the news of so-called reality, which is really selective. You get sound bites. Well, in Cops, you're not getting sound bites. You're getting the whole incident as it happened. And that's unusual. Even to this day, that's unusual.
Has the advent of the internet and broadband affected the way you do your shows?
No, what the internet and broadband has done is it's allowed Fox to put cops on Hulu and make a ton of money, along with all the other programming they put on there. Well, I don't get any of it, just so you know. No, it's caused a lot of piracy originally. Cops episodes used to appear on YouTube all the time and I complained about it because I said, well, wait a minute, it's one thing to show it, but shouldn't we get some kind of residual out of this? We didn't, obviously, until Hulu came along and they suddenly policed YouTube. And it ceased to appear on YouTube because NBC and Fox are now.
And you haven't been asked to do any kind of extras or anything for the internet?
No.
You also have done some feature films.
Yes, feature films.
Yeah.
I have a couple this year, one of which is called Brooklyn's Finest. It'll probably be released, maybe it's going to be released first quarter of next 2010, I think. And it's got a very nice cast: Don Cheadle, Ethan Hawke, Wesley Snipes, Richard Gere, Ellen Barkin, Will Patton, all kinds of good actors. It's directed by Antoine Fuqua, the guy who did Training Day, and it's an interesting cop drama. Brooklyn's Finest. You kind of get the drift. It's about three cops and their interweaving lives. One is a cop about to retire, one is an undercover cop, and one is a narcotics cop. And it's much in the vein of Training Day, and Ethan Hawke sort of assumes the role that Denzel Washington had in Training Day. So I urge people to take a look at it. Interesting film. The other one's called Leaves of Grass with Edward Norton, Susan Sarandon, Kerry Russell, Richard Dreyfuss, and Tim Blake Nelson, who also directed it. Very interesting film, quirky, offbeat, about brothers. Edward Norton plays a dual role as twin brothers, one of whom is a professor, the other is a ne'er-do-well, drug-dealing, no account, and they're all from Oklahoma. And the reason it appealed to me, it was very autobiographical, because I have a no-accountant brother, and I was once a college professor, or wannabe professor. So it has a lot of resonance for me, and it's an interesting film, and it'll probably come out first quarter of 2010.
What do you think are the most important things that you've learned about producing over the years?
Most important things I've learned about producing, I would say, is focus. I cannot underestimate or overstate the value of focus. You can't hit a target if you're not aiming at it, And most people say they want to do this or they want to do that, but they don't have any focus. They want to be a writer, but they don't write. You can't be a writer unless you write. Or they want to be an actor, but they don't act, or they want to be a producer, but they don't produce. I don't care what you produce something, or write something. I'll give you a quick anecdote that's a very true story. There were two kids from video archives who came to me in my early days of my career and said, can you give us a job as production assistants? We know you're going to do this Dolph Lundgren video, exercise video. I said, sure. So I gave them a job as PAs, and they were out there, and their job was to pick up dog droppings in Venice Beach. True story. One of them came to me, I'll call him Twiddly-Dee and Twiddly-Dum, right? Twiddly-Dee comes to me one day and he says, I don't know, John, can you give me some advice about how to make it in this business? Or what advice would you give me? And I looked at him and I said, okay, Roger, if you want to be a writer, write. If you want to be a director, direct. And if you want to be a producer, produce. And he said, that's it? That's your advice? And I said, that's exactly my advice. So he turned around, he walked off, picked up some more dog droppings while his companion was arguing with the DP about something. And at the end of the day, he came back to me and he said, John, I quit. And I said, congratulations. And I said, so what are you going to do now? And he says, I'm a writer and I'm a director. And that's what I'm doing. And I said, good for you. That was Roger Avery. The other kid that also dropped his bag of dog doo was Quentin Tarantino. So they wandered off at the end of the day and went on to do all kinds of things like Pulp Fiction and whatever. So I guess the moral of the story is if you want to succeed in this business, don't get stuck picking up dog droppings in Venice Beach.
How has television changed since you started in the business?
How has it changed? I think it's a lot tougher to be an independent in this day and age because the tendency is always toward corporate, monolithic enterprise. Guys like me, I think the networks and the studios would like to stomp out like cockroaches scurrying across the kitchen floor. They would just assume we not exist. But by the same token, they can't do all of the programming. They don't have people working in-house that are going to come up with the Cops or the Hill Street Blues, whether no matter the genre or Survivor. They just don't have the wherewithal to do all these shows that are going to make a difference in their industry or for their network or for their studio. So they'll still have to come to us, but it's harder to get through the door as an independent. And it's hard to make a living. I was very fortunate because I started early and I had some proprietary rights, so I've done extremely well in this business. But that's not what I set out to do. I didn't set out to make money. I set out to do shows. And I was fortunate because I'm still doing shows. But there are a lot of different ingredients. There's ageism, there's sexism, there's all the isms you can encounter in any business in the entertainment industry, and particularly in television. If you're over 50, they're going to kiss you goodbye, But unless you're a guy like me that's already got some stuff going, and they know you'll deliver. But it's tougher in that regard. It's tougher to get through the doors, I think, if you're not representing some conglomerate or some company that does format rights, or you're not in-house with some network.
Do you consider yourself a pioneer in television?
Not for me to decide. That's for others to figure out. I think I've done some interesting work. That's about as far as I'll put. I don't know what, it depends on the definition. What do you really mean? You know what I mean?
What do you think is your proudest achievement within your career?
I think the thing for which I'll be most known is going to be Cops. It's tough to top that act on a lot of levels, and I think it's the most innovative thing I've done on television. And I'm very proud of the show, and I'm happy that I did it and I was involved in it. I suppose if I put it into a metaphoric framework, I would say that when all is said and done, I think I've added something to the profile of television. Now, whether it's a wart or a beauty mark is for others to decide, but I do think I've added something.
Do you think there's a John Langley style?
I think there's definitely a style that I brought to the shows that I've done that seems to have been imitated often or picked up on by other people. I think that's fair to say. And that isn't a boast. I just think it's objectively true, because I know that when we first did Cops, suddenly commercials started doing the same technique, and other television shows started doing it. And again, I don't claim to have invented cinema verite, because I didn't, obviously. I told the anecdote about Frederick Wiseman. He and the French and a lot of people were doing that long before I. But in terms of television, I think I definitely brought that to network television and to programming, TV programming, and I think that it had an impact, yes.
Now, our last question that we ask our interviewees is, how would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered for having a long life. God, how would I like to remember you? Is that one of those, what would you put on your epitaph? I don't know, I've read a few great epitaphs. One was, I told you I was sick. And the other one, how would I like to be remembered? I think I'd like to be remembered as someone who brought something to the table for the banquet of television.
That's a good answer. Well, thank you so much, Sean. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.